Hello and welcome back to Bizarre coverage from Mana Clash 2025. I'm Dylan Kakawa here with Isaac Lee, and we're about to cover round 6. You feeling good about this match, Isaac?
I'm feeling really good about this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Ed Nurse on Reanimator play. Reanimator is just, it's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, we've got Ed Nurse on Reanimator, and he's going to be playing against Matthew Giudes on Grixis.
Yeah, so Ed Nurse managed to come top 4 and take away a volcanic island at the World Championships, Mana Clash 2025, just yesterday. Coming back today and already going X1, going into round 6, which is pretty impressive. So a top showing from Ed, playing into Giudes.
Yeah, Ed's a good player, and Giudes is a good player, so this should be a really tight match.
Yeah.
Ed also likes to not mulligan. So let's see how, is that maybe because he's used to playing against Thoughtseize decks. So maybe he's just going to avoid mulliganing to avoid getting Thoughtseized again.
Could be, could be. Giudes is also just fresh off an incredible set of wins at the Pro Tour recently.
Yep, went 10-6, undefeated in draft.
Undefeated in draft. Wow, this is not draft though.
Well,
this is constructed.
It's true. Some people might call Highlander cube constructed. I like the analogy a lot. So it can be a bit like draft. In the singleton format, there are a skill set that exists in singleton formats.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree.
All right, so we've got players shuffling up, presenting, getting ready. Ed and Giudes giving each other a bit of a stare down from Giudes there and checking over to each other's teammates. All right.
So if you're in Matt's position here,
yep,
what are you hoping to have in your opening hand?
I'm looking for probably a Thoughtseize effect. I want to have as much information as possible because I want to know where Ed's hand is weakest. I want to know if it's weakest on putting a creature in the bin or getting it out.
Yep.
And tacking from that point and also knowing which cards to counter.
Yeah.
When to leave mana open and when to deploy threats.
So even a Gitaxian Probe and being able to see that information, really important.
Yeah, Gitaxian Probe arguably better because you don't have to spend mana and then you can maybe cantrip into something you need in order to deal with that hand.
Yep.
All right, Ed mulliganing here on camera. We have footage of Ed taking a mulligan.
That is, like, unheard of. But we have it here, folks. We have the footage. We're able to play it back in the future. It is possible for Ed Nurse to take a mulligan.
He might have nightmares about that. Just playing back in his mind over and over again.
One of the downsides of taking a mulligan as the Reanimator deck is that you can't just go to your draw step, get up to 8 cards, and then go to discard and discard your fatty.
That's true. It doesn't feel good to put yourself a whole turn behind like that sometimes, but sometimes it's the plan you got to go with.
Yeah, especially if your hand is like a fatty, a swamp, a dark ritual, and an animate dead.
Yeah. All right. Ed's 6 here.
I can see a couple lands, an Exhume, and
Traxxas, Oko, and Coma.
Yep, all right.
And Bone Shards, I believe.
Yeah, so really hoping that Matt's first turn is like a Tameo, so that Ed can put his fatty in the bin using that Bone Shards.
Yeah, and then Exhume can bring them both back.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I can deal with my opponent having a Tameo if I get to have an Atraxer in play.
Yep. The other good thing about the Bone Shards as well is even if it does get countered from like a Force of Negation, Force of Will, Daze, or anything, the creature still goes to the bin.
Yeah, it's part of the cost to discard a card in order to destroy target creature or planeswalker on Bone Shards. And that means that fatty is in the bin, which is one of the main objectives when it comes to Bone Shards.
Yeah, so I think Ed is hoping for some kind of creature that he can interact with and then, put the fatty in the bin and Exhume. But he still has that plan B of just slamming an Oko. And we see a Ragavan from Giudes on turn 1. A Force of Negation backup as well by the looks of it in his hand.
I think Ed's actually going to have a smile on his face going, you know what? Exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a turn 1 creature so that I can use this Bone Shards in order to put my Atraxer in the bin.
Yeah, I think Giudes was probably going to let the Force of Negation resolve if it goes ahead like that, because while the Ragavan is powerful, he doesn't necessarily need it to win this game, and the Force of Negation is so powerful on a crucial turn.
Yeah, because it's kind of like 2 halves to the card in Bone Shards. Part 1 is killing the Ragavan, sure. But part 2 is being able to discard that creature. And so Force of Negation can counter half of this spell in killing the Ragavan, but doesn't counter the fact that Atraxas is going to go to the graveyard.
Yeah, definitely a nice cost. And Giudes checking Ed fetching the right land there.
Yeah, so the context for that for those watching at home, is that yesterday Ed Nurse was on camera, and in the first instance of being on coverage for the first time, cracked a Foddered Strand and got a Bayou.
Badlands.
Badlands, okay, and wasn't able to, so we had to have a rewind. A pretty simple mistake that happens, and especially when the nerves are a bit higher on camera.
That's definitely true. I remember my first time on camera, I was a bit nervous.
Yep. So we see that resolve, and I really like this from Giudes. Right?
Yeah.
Like there was no consideration.
No,
Right? No, like, hey, I'm thinking about whether to cast this Force of Negation or Force of Will.
just knew exactly that he didn't care about it. Knew that the Ragavan wasn't important to like winning the game in the game plan, whereas the Force of Negation can be such a crucial piece.
Yeah, yeah. So having that snap decision, or maybe even thinking about it beforehand.
I reckon he thought about it beforehand.
Yeah, so if this gets killed by something, am I going to Force of Negation it? And he knew that the answer was no, and so gave away zero information about his hand by not even stopping to consider that.
Yep. Well, Giudes also having the reanimate to bring back the Ragavan.
Oh, no,
buddy. Bring the Atraxa. That's, oh, my God. I forgot the Atraxa was in the bin.
Yeah.
Reanimate's such a powerful card here.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you what, the reanimation deck is definitely winning right now.
That's true.
It's just not the one that we anticipated. So we're going to reveal 10 cards and get the ability to take one copy of each of the different types of cards that are there. So we might see one land, one instant, one sorcery, one creature. And it looks like we've got Mental Misstep, Expressive Iteration, a land, a creature. So we're gonna see
We've got a few choices of creatures, actually. Deathrite, Shaman, Baragoyf, Shouldered. Sorcery choices are Preordain, Git Probe. And then there's also Cling to Dust, Mental Misstep, and Lightning Bolt. I kind of want to take this Cling to Dust, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, okay. So you got the ability to remove any cards that will go to the graveyard in the future. And
there's the sorcery as well for the Expressive Iteration. So he's going with
Misstep.
Yep,
okay, so taking those four, putting the rest on the bottom. What are your thoughts on Misstep here? Like taking the Misstep over the Cling to Dust?
I think the Misstep is really good because it can counter something like Entomb or Worldly Tutor. Vampiric Tutor, it counters just so many more things versatile that Ed may not be able to rely on the graveyard anyway. So something like an Oath, being able to find an Oath of Druids with the Vampiric Tutor, especially if you don't have an answer for the Oath, you do want to counter the Vampiric Tutor.
Yeah. And another real powerful one-drop spell that we've actually seen already played by Giudes is the actual card Reanimated.
Yep. So Ed drawing his third land here, giving himself the ability to drop an Oko if he so chooses, which he might have to do to just stop how scary this Atraxa is.
So Oko coming down, and this time Matthew has stopped and said, you know what, I am going to consider this, and I've decided to play that Force of Negation.
Yep, I think Oko definitely worth Force of Negationing there, and Ed picks it up. He's not beating the Atraxa and the cards in his hand.
Wow. That was fast. Let's have a look at these sideboards and see what kind of things we're gonna see from. Let's start from a Giudes position.
Yep.
Looking at his sideboard, you understand how Grixis tends to sideboard. What kind of cards are you considering to bring in against the reanimation deck?
Ashiok the Dreamrender is the first one.
Oh.
This card is very powerful, and Ed is playing a lot of tutors as well, which are going to be shut off by Ashiok. Being able to bomb the graveyard, and it's really underrated in singleton formats of being able to take cards from your opponent's deck and strip them of those resources entirely. So we've also got Unlicensed Hearse, a Submerge might come in here, Price of Progress, and maybe some blasts. Some red and blue blasts, depending on how he thinks. Maybe not the blue blast, but probably some red blasts.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options available in the main deck for Giudes, for Matthew Giudes. So it doesn't have to do a lot of sideboarding because he's got the Force of Negation in the main. He's got the Force of Will in the main. He's got the Reanimate in the main. He's got the Thoughtseize, the Inquisition Duress. And so just adding a couple of things like that Unlicensed Hearse and the Ashiok, as you said. Although I do have some considerations with the Ashiok. I do think it's good.
Yeah.
But 3 mana, I think if Ed's doing his thing, 3 mana is too much.
That's fair. I think, however, when you can back it up with things like Force of Will, Force of Negation, Daze, it's very hard to deal with that Ashiok when it ever resolves. It may not be the best overall because a lot of what Ed can do is just set up a turn where he puts a card into a graveyard and immediately reanimates. But in the right position, Ashiok may just snipe something.
For sure.
And what would you say Ed is bringing in sideboarding for this matchup?
Oh, I'm going straight to this Veil of Summer. That's my go-to. Cryptic Command for single green. counter your thought seize and draw a card, counter your counter spell and draw a card. Absolutely fantastic. So I'm bringing in that Veil of Summer. I would probably consider bringing in a Besager because I don't know what Matthew Giudes' hand and library is like. So I'm thinking, is there going to be like a Wayline of the Void? Is there going to be an unlicensed Hearse, which we do know that there is?
Yep, Matt has one.
Yep. So bringing in Besager to be able to kill that, and then maybe bringing in.
Did you bring in the Assassin's Trophy for a similar reason, also being able to remove a threat? There is only one basic in Matthew Giudes' deck.
Yeah.
Basic Island. So.
Yep, Assassin's Trophy, and then maybe that Giudes as well.
Being able to check Grixis' hand is often very good because you know what to play around.
Yeah, yeah.
Hand checking in this format is so powerful.
One of the important things that we've got to be aware of as a Reanimator player is don't over-sideboard.
Yeah, you've got to keep your deck like still doing its thing. You don't want to have too many reactive pieces and no longer being able to do anything proactive because you will just die eventually.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing with combo decks is you've got to be really lean on what you're sideboarding out.
Yeah, and trying to play an interaction battle with Grixis that's a losing battle, I feel.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Main deck Cling to Dust as well.
Yeah, that's that card has been very impressive in a lot of matchups.
And Giudes choosing not to put that Cling to Dust in hand.
No, I think he wanted the mental misstep to answer any sort of interaction Ed might have had.
Yep, yep. Which, yeah, considering we saw a concession like a turn later, makes complete sense.
All right, so Ed's going to be on the play for game 2 as we shuffle up here. Which side of the table would you rather be on, assuming we were at 0-0?
It depends on whether my objective is to win or my objective is to have as much fun as possible.
So if you were to win, would it be Grixis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the deck that has Force of Negation, Force of Will, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Duress against a combo deck, like it's an uphill battle for Ed.
Yeah.
But oh, it feels so good to put a fatty in play on turn 1 or 2.
See, I agree, and that's why I still think Grixis is more fun, as Giudes did put an Atraxa into play last game.
Oh, you got me. You got me on a technicality, though.
Yeah, he had more fun last game. I feel that.
So Ed looking at his opening hand, looks like a land there as a Thoughtseize as well, but
He's mulliganed again.
Doesn't have the reanimation stuff going on. So a little bit of interaction, but as you said earlier, playing playing that interaction game against Grixis, trying to play on that level, not really what Ed is about.
No, it's a bit like wrestling with a pig in the mud. The pig enjoys it.
Yeah, for sure. Although I do want to still, if I'm Ed, I want to see either like a turn 1 Dark Ritual, Entomb, Reanimate type situation, so like a turn 1 something good, or I'd like to see a turn 1 Thoughtseize with the ability to combo off within 3 turns.
Yeah, I like that. I think the thing with interaction out of the Reanimated deck is it needs to really be more backbreaking otherwise. And being able to really see what's going on from like a Thoughtseize allows you to play around the interaction from the hand. Not quite the top of the deck, but you can still play around the top of the deck a bit if you know what you're thinking. And it looks like Ed's drawn another no-lander and mulliganing to 5.
Yep. Interesting fact, the Assassin's Trophy. So Assassin's Trophy instead of Abrupt Decay. So Abrupt Decay basically does the same kind of thing, but the Abrupt Decay can't be countered.
Yeah, so the Assassin's Trophy is going to be less useful on something like a Hearse.
Yep.
Because we do want the Hearse gone, and not being able to be countered is very valuable. However, the Assassin's Trophy can hit things like Murktide or Tasiga, or just problematic threats that you might otherwise die to.
I recently discovered that Assassin's Trophy also targets Wayline of the Void, whereas Abrupt Decay does not.
Yep, it's a pretty big one, even though it's a singleton format.
So I play a lot of graveyard-based shenanigans.
Yep.
And with a new deck that I recently built, I put the Assassin's Trophy in, thinking it kills everything, and then my opponent said, pre-game actions? I'm going to start with the Wayline of the Void in play.
So that's the wrong mana cost.
Oh, no. So, mulliganing to 5 for Ed Nurse. Let's see how he goes.
Ooh, he's got
couple
fast mana, an Animate Dead, a Preordain, Git Probe.
Yeah.
He's got to lose 2 of these cards, so he's losing the... No, he's choosing which ones he's keeping. He's going to lose the Mox.
The Mox, keeping the Animate Dead, the Probe, the Preordain, and putting a land and a Chrome Mox back, which, considering only got 5 cards left. The Chrome Mox is an easy one to put to the bottom.
Yeah, Chrome Mock's way less effective when you start with fewer cards in your hand.
Yeah. Unless you're going to put that thing into play on turn 1.
Yeah, so Ed Nurse leading off with a Git probe here, being able to see what interaction Giudes has. Giudes has a Thoughtseize, Drown in the Lock, and Counterspell as interaction with a Barragoyf and Murktide region as threats.
And a couple of lands to go with it.
Sorry?
A couple of lands to go with those spells.
Yes, a couple of lands to go with them.
Which is something that Ed was missing in those first 2 hands, it looked like.
Yeah, and Giudes, I imagine, going to be very happy to turn 1 Thoughtseize his opponent who's mulled to 5 on the play.
So
and Ed's drawn a Lotus Petal. He's got everything he needs except a fatty in the bin.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we're going to probably see a cracking of the fetch land in order to play that Preordain and try and find something like an Entomb or something like a sideboard card, maybe one that Isaac really likes.
Yeah.
A little Veil of Summer. A little Veil of Summer to counter and draw off that Cryptic Command against the Thoughtseize.
Yeah, there is also an argument you can make for leaving the Verdant Catacombs open and going end of turn for a Surveil land and maybe trying to spook, like, hit that fatty.
Ooh, that'd be an interesting play.
Especially because maybe it's not so good because he knows about the Thoughtseize. So,
yeah. All right, any Veil of Summers, any Veil of Summers.
No Veil of Summers. Looks like a Lindol's Vault and a Bone Shards again.
Yep. Okay, so Ed's probably thinking to himself, you know what?
Oh, he's keeping them.
He's keeping both.
So I think he knows he's getting Thoughtseize turn 1, so he wants to be able to use this Limdal's Vault on turn 2 before Giudes has counter magic.
So this is a tricky one, So explain to our audience here exactly what happened in terms of how he managed to protect the most valuable card in the top couple of cards with that Preordain.
So because the Preordain scries 2 and then draws a card, it means you're guaranteed to draw one of the top card of your deck, really. But because you can choose to rearrange the order of the cards, putting a card second from the top means that on your next draw step, you're going to draw it, meaning it's not in your hand for when a Thoughtseize can be played. So one thing Thoughtseize is notoriously bad at is playing around the top of the deck. Yeah. And best way to make that happen is to change the order of your deck.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So we're going to see another land here by Matthew and keeping up in the counterspell here, which Ed knows about. So you know what? I'm not going to fire off this Limdal's Vault. I'm just going to wait.
So Ed's drawn an Oko here. And Giudes with a Bloodstained Mire going to be able to find Volcanic Island or maybe even a Thundering Falls. But choose to leave it open in order to not get got by cracking the fetch land in response.
So see main phase tapping that for, is that an Inquisition of Kozilek?
I believe that's an Inquisition of Kozilek.
Yeah.
Still not tapping that fetch land, giving Ed the opportunity to play something in response. Very heads up.
Very heads up. So we might see a pop-off of that Limdal's Vault, and then I reckon we'll see a pop-off of that counterspell.
Yeah, I reckon this Limdal's Vault will be eaten by a counterspell. Giudes might have to consider, what if Ed has a Veil of Summer in hand? That would be really bad, but he may have just led with the Veil of Summer into the Inquisition. But he does know about the counterspell, so it could be a bit of a mind game going on there.
Yeah.
But it looks like this Limdal's Vault is resolving.
Well, I mean, there is something to be said for being down a card.
That is true.
So Giudes knows that, like, you know what? I'm going to let that Limdal's Vault resolve, and then I'm going to counter the card that you put on top of your library, and you actually be down a card as a result.
So what are you looking to find with Limdal's Vault here?
I am looking to find 2 things. The first thing is a really good card that I actually want to play, and the second thing is something that can counter that counterspell that I know is in Giudes' hand. Which is going to be hard. So that's minimum. I'm going to have 2 draw steps in order to get around this because that Inquisition is going to resolve, and it's going to hit. I think that nothing. There's a Bone Shards in hand.
Yeah, I think the only respite Ed kind of has at the moment is that Giudes hasn't deployed a threat yet.
Yep.
But as we know, that can change very quickly from Grixis.
So looking at that top 5 we've got at the moment there, we've got a Mental Misstep, we've got a Vampiric Tutor. And Ed goes, you know what? I could take that Vampiric Tutor, maybe get an Oath of Druids, but no, it gets counted. I can't do it. Got to do something else. Got to do something better. So Faithless Saluting Reanimate is an option. Nope. So I'm going to take another damage here.
Chrome Mox, Ponder, Life, Death, Tropical Island, and Bloodstained Mire. I think that one's going as well.
Limdal's Vault is a very powerful card that takes quite a while to resolve.
We see here the Oath Iona Archon of Cruelty, Tainted Indulgence, and a Swamp.
Yeah, so that could be interesting. But again, it's falling into this trap of having, yes, a relevant spell, but also it gets countered by counterspell.
It does, and I wonder if Ed is trying to bait out the counterspell and try and go with an Oko plan.
Yep, could be. Or the Inquisition might take the Oko.
I'd forgotten that was on the stack. There's been so much Limdol's vaulting happening.
Yeah.
I guess that Oko is not long for this world. I'm curious to see what Ed is looking for.
So Ed had the other option in his turn of playing that Oko.
Yep.
And that would actually sacrifice the Lotus Petal. And yes, it'd probably trigger the counterspell. But I think keeping the Limdal's Vault open and having options there is a pretty good play by Ed.
Yeah.
But right now, I'd be sitting there going, oh, I kind of wish I played that Oko.
Yeah, so the Inquisition coming into play on turn 3 as well, not coming into play on turn 2.
So we see a shuffle of the rest of the deck, and then Ed gets to put that 5 cards that he's chosen to keep back on top of his library in any order. So it's kind of like a Vampiric Tutor that you also get to look at the other 4 cards.
Yeah, Vampiric Tutor and 4 friends.
Yep. So we see Oath of Druids, Iona, and some other cards there. And Giudes knows that there's going to be some good cards, at least 1 or 2. So
Well, there's only 2 cards, Oko and Bone Shards. And unsurprisingly, the Oko gets taken. Giudes here possibly fetching to just while he's got the opportunity, but chooses not to instead. And looks like he's going to continue to leave mana open. Because he doesn't have access to blue in response to something else. So the moment he sacks that fetch land, he loses access to double blue.
yeah, but what he does gain as a result is if I draw a Brainstorm, I've still got a fetch land in play that I can shuffle away the bad cards.
Urza's Bauble revealing the Bone Shards he already knew about. Lost the 50-50 there, but I don't think it's going to be too relevant. Tainted Indulgence. It's going to allow him to draw 2 cards and discard probably one of the fatties on top of his deck, either the Archon or the Iona.
Yep.
So it looks like he's gone with the Archon.
And Matthew Giudes missing his land drop there.
Yeah, so unable to deploy a threat like a Barrogoyf or anything else. He's playing really tight around what Ed could possibly put on top of his deck. Because that's always a scary thing when your opponent Limdal's Vaults. So Giudes taking this opportunity now to sack the Bloodstained Maya and get the blue source so he can't get got.
So we might see a Volcanic Island here.
I'd imagine so.
So we got Volcanic Island in play, Underground Sea, and from a Grixis deck, we see a Bayou.
Yeah, so the Bayou here is for Deathrite Shaman and Carpet of Flowers in the sideboard. Deathrite Shaman, an incredibly powerful 1-point card, fantastic use of points, giving any sort of deck the ability to have a mana dork, very powerful. Not to mention it operates as Graveyard Hate, works as a life gain engine and a clock for your opponent. It's just fighting everything on so many different fronts. There is a reason it was referred to as a 1-mana Planeswalker.
So Ed drawing Oath of Druids for turn. I suspect that the draw spell Ed was hoping would get countered, and then he'd get to untap and play the Oath of Druids. But very smartly, Giudes going, you know what? You can resolve that draw step, that draw cards. That is maybe what you wanted to do, but I've decided to keep my counterspell open because I don't want to tap out in my turn after you've just Limdal's Vaulted.
Yeah, and I think Ed had set it up both ways, so even if it did get countered and he would have to draw 2 cards and discard 1, he would still eventually draw into the Oath and be able to land it. Ooh, and a Cling to Dusk targeting the Archon here proactively. So Giudes trying to spend his mana as efficiently as possible, and I think that's so he can finally deploy a threat here, like maybe this Murktide. But he does only have 3 blue sources where he needs a 4th.
Now, did we just draw another, like a Reanimate off the top?
Or maybe that's a...
Just after exiling the target?
Just after exiling the target.
Very interesting.
But we're deploying the Murktide here. Leave it, not having the counterspell mana open now.
That's relevant. So, shields down.
But there is a Drown in the Lock in Giudes' hand, which he can cast as a counterspell. So Ed might see this as no counterspell and try and go for it now that Giudes doesn't have double blue mana.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, considering the play, considering the situation, considering you know that the counterspell is there, I'm thinking from Ed's side, you just got to yam. You got to give him. You got to say, you know what?
I think you do, but I think Ed also probably knows that there's another piece of interaction.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying that Ed's going to sit there going, yep, this is definitely going to resolve.
Yeah.
I think Ed's pretty smart, and he's going to go, you know what, this is unlikely, but it's my best shot. So we see a Surveyor Land here, and hopefully we'll see that Veil Summer again. I keep mentioning this Veil Summer.
It's very powerful in this matchup, especially if Giudes taps low and doesn't have the ability to interact. But it looks like there's a Sylvan tutor on top that he's kept.
Keeping that in play.
So that's going to allow him to put Metamorphosis Fanatic on top of his deck, meaning he can miracle it and get back any fatty from his graveyard. Also, the Cling to Dust has been exiled by the Murktide Regent, which means that, it's not something he has to worry about again. So sacrificing the Lotus Petal for the Oath of Druids, choosing not to pay the 1 life for the Mana Confluence, which is quite reasonable given this Murktide is a 6/6. But I think he's going to go for the Bone Shards here and just get the Murktide off the table.
As an additional cost, sacrifice that Iona. So get that in the bin. That Cling to Dust is still in the graveyard, though. So, I don't know. No, actually, it's not in the graveyard because it got exiled
exiled with the Murktide.
It got exiled with the Murktide,
Yeah,
so that one's out of play.
Something he has to worry about anymore. Giudes has a Force of Will in hand, but I believe he also has that Reanimator.
We might see this. That's a very quick tapping of that black mana Reanimate target thing.
What color do you name here, Isaac?
I think it's got to be black.
Got to be black?
Yeah, so black is the only way that I think Ed is going to interact and kill the Iona. It also shuts down Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, Necromancy, Reanimate, Exhume.
Metamorphosis Fanatic.
Metamorphosis Fanatic, yeah.
The one thing it doesn't shut off, but has already been taken care of, is the Oko.
Yeah. You make a good point. But I tell you what deals with the Oko, Counterspell.
Yep. So Giudes is about to have an Iona here with Counterspell backup.
Yeah.
Going to put Ed on a 2-turn clock. I feel Ed may be feeling like he was... got the decks mixed up for a second.
Yeah. So who won? Well, both games have been really handled by Reanimation. So if somebody asks you who won this game, the Reanimator player won this game.
Reanimator player won this game. And the match is finished by the looks of it, or?
Yeah, it looks like everybody's having a bit of a laugh here, although, yeah, looks like it's, shuffling up and de-sideboarding, which means we'll just find out exactly who won and come back to the booth. I love teams. Look at these 6 players, right? Yep. They're all just laughing, having fun.
So we've got game 3 happening between Stephen Hitchcock and Torin Kelderman. Right. Stephen is on Grixis. What do we have Torin on?
Torin in table 7. Let's have a look here. I'm going to bring this up now for us so that we can have a look at what Torin's playing. Often plays like a mid-range pile, and that's exactly what we see here with some Jund.
Got Jund good stuff.
Ooh, a Menskin Boo, Timeless Hero, Grist and a Renin 6 as some Planeswalkers to start with. The points that he's on is, wow, Reanimate.
Ooh.
So we could see another Reanimate, Strip Mine, Menskin Boo, Renin 6, and Deathrite Shaman.
Very powerful points indeed. Stephen laying out a smiley face for us here on the left as this is the decider for this match.
So am I right in thinking that all 3 players are on Grixis on the other side?
They sure are. The entire team came to a consensus on a 75 as they're all big Grixis fans and they thought, let's be Team Grixis.
Yeah, I like that.
That much faith in the deck. All 3 of them.
Yeah. So this particular team trios has no restrictions on the composition of your deck. So all 3 players can play the exact same 75. No unification of any kind.
So Stephen leading us off with a Flooded Strand here. Psychic Frog in hand alongside an Unholy Heat, an Expressive Iteration, Basic Island, and I think another fetch land.
Yep. Torin starts with a Surveyor Land, has a think for a while and decides to put...
Generous Ent.
Yeah. A card that you can reanimate.
A card you can reanimate. The card's pretty good at putting itself in the graveyard normally, but sometimes Arrakis Theatre can do it just for you.
Yep. These Surveyor Lands. Oh.
They're so powerful, and Stephen's going to follow suit.
Yep, exactly right. So what do you reckon the chances are that Stephen untaps and plays a Reanimate on that Generous Ent?
If he sees it, probably pretty high, but I'm thinking he's looking to develop this Psychic Frog.
Oh, Psychic Frog. I tell you what, that is a card that is currently at 1 point, was previously at 0 points, and I reckon we're going to see some uptick in that points department because I've seen so many people see the Psychic Frog, put it in their deck, and really utilize it with such an amazing amount of like ingenuity in terms of like being able to draw cards. But also, I'm just going to kill you.
Have you seen it interact with Murktide Regent?
I have not. Tell me about this.
It makes Murktide Regent huge because it's exiling the instants and sorceries from your graveyard as you can exile 3 at a time to give Psychic Frog flying.
Wow.
Which puts a +1/+1 counter on the Murktide.
Wow. So it just keeps going up. Big, 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 big.
Yeah, these two one-pointed cards synergize together really well.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So we see a Cracker Fetch for a Badlands, getting the 3 colors of mana, Grixis.
So having access to double black instead of double blue. And deploys the Psychic Frog.
Ding, 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 ding. Like you said, Kakawa. Psychic Frog coming in.
I must admit, when I first saw the art for Psychic Frog, it took me a while to pass that it was actually a frog. I thought the eye, its head is sideways. I didn't realize it was sideways. I thought it was just a really weird-looking frog.
Yeah. Well, it depends on which art you're looking at. I like the one that kind of looks like a Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Hypnotoad type Psychic Frog.
Yeah, no, I thought it had 2 vertical eyes and a tongue coming out of it sideways, but no, its head was just tilted. All right, so Torin going and finding a Bayou here off a Windswept Heath. I imagine he wants an answer for this Psychic Frog because it's going to be really scary if it connects, but no, just has a Douthie Voidwalker to play.
Yep.
Still a powerful card.
Well,
but
I love me a Douthie Voidwalker.
Unfortunately, Steven's got an answer to it in his hand in the form of this Unholy Heat. And the Psychic Frog is going to get, like, it can get huge, but also it's going to start drawing cards. It's going to start, if Torin doesn't have an answer now, it might mean he does not have an answer at all. And if he draws an answer, well, Steven might have already drawn a response for that answer and keep the Psychic Frog alive and just run away with the game.
All right, so we see that Unholy Heat.
Does get exiled due to how Douthie Voidwalker works, because state-based actions kill the creature, and when state-based actions check, the Unholy Heat is in the graveyard.
So we see a little dice on that Unholy Heat. The reason why we see that dice is it actually has a, I think it's a silver counter from the Douthie Voidwalker?
Void counter, I believe.
Void counter, okay, yeah.
So that means that if this Douthie comes back into play, might be able to cast that Unholy Heat later.
For sure.
So,
Whoa.
Steven playing 3 spells in that turn, deploying 2 more threats in the form of Deathrite Shaman and Tameo.
3 turns, 3 points in play.
That's always kind of where you want to be in these Grixis decks. Yeah. One of the reasons of wanting to play 1-pointed cards is you want to see as many different ones of these as possible. So we're going to see a Scythe Cat Cub come out from Torin, as well as probably a land to buff it, and I think a Deathrite Shaman is a follow-up play, just to try and compete a bit with this.
All right, so we get a +1/+1 counter on that Scythe Cat Cub, and then that Deathrite Shaman coming out as well. So in terms of this Psychic Frog, only 2 cards in the bin, but you can discard another card in order to have 3 cards in the graveyard. Exile those 3 cards, get into attack with both Tameo and Psychic Frog, draw a card with a Psychic Frog, and then be able to crack the clue in order to flip the Tameo, which is pretty big game.
That is pretty big. The other alternative is he can just attack with the Psychic Frog and force some discard some cards and force a kill.
Okay, so if you attack with the Psychic Frog, and Torin says, you know what, I'm going to block with my Cub.
Yeah.
Then it's just, okay, cool. I'll just discard 2 cards, and I'll eat your cat.
Yeah.
That's basically like eating a card as well as turning my thing into a 3/4.
Yeah, you do 2 for 1 yourself, but the Psychic Frog getting bigger is quite relevant, taking away further abilities to just try and block it as a fair game. Plus, this Tameo being in play is going to work as an engine so you can recuperate the cards you lose. But Steven going to go with an expressive iteration here by the looks of it to try and gain more resources.
Yeah, and also know exactly what he wants to do, because if he finds a counterspell, if he finds a bit of interaction, then maybe he wants to do something different than tap out with his mana or use the clue token with the Tameo.
Yep, so it looks like we've seen a blue Elemental Blast and a Lorien revealed there. I'm not sure what the third card is, but it's a counterspell.
Yep,
so
old school counterspell.
I think the counterspell is going to go to hand here, and one of these other cards is unfortunately going to be wasted in exile. Because there are no targets for the blue Elemental Blast, and the Lorien revealed costs 5 mana, and you can't cycle it.
Yep, okay, so putting the blast on the bottom and saying, you know what, bye-bye, Lorien revealed, I'm not going to cast you, so you just exiled.
All right, so the other option, as you pointed out earlier, we do have the ability to just jump the Psychic Frog.
Yep.
And get over the Scythe Cat.
Yeah, and if you like all of the cards in your hand, that might be what you're going to do.
And that looks like it's what Steven's going to do. I think he wants to flip this Tamiyo this turn.
And just a reminder, this is game 3 of match 3 in round 6 of this Team Trios Highlander event, where every player is playing for some pretty juicy prizes.
Yeah. Another really cool thing about this Psychic Frog, exiling those lands from the graveyard means Torin's not going to have the ability to use the Death Right.
Ah, good point, good point. So we see an attack here. We get a clue activation. I have a bit of a concern about flipping that Tamiyo because that Scythe Cat cub is actually going to get really large. So I reckon maybe I'll just keep it in play.
Well, Steven has just drawn a Drown in the Lock. So he could just kill the Scythe Cat cub.
Could do, could do. Yeah. A couple different options, but Steven has chosen to just pass the turn. And ooh, what's that card?
It's a Worldly Tutor.
Worldly Tutor. That might be an upkeep Worldly Tutor in order to find Metamorphosis Fanatic.
Yep.
And importantly here, in terms of that Drown in the Lock, it doesn't counter Metamorphosis Fanatic.
It does not.
It would counter Worldly Tutor. So an interesting decision here, but there's a couple different options available as well as just cracking that clue. So
yeah, well, Steven does have the counterspell, so he's okay with you know, the card disadvantage from the Worldly Tutor. So
the
I think he's
expressive
just
iteration found that counterspell, didn't it? Yeah, yeah. So Metamorphosis Fanatic, Miracle off the top. And then we'll see a reaction from Steven.
Yeah, I can't imagine he wouldn't counter this, to be honest. It would get back a Generous End, which I believe also has Reach.
Ooh, good point. Reach is...
pretty good into a Psychic Frog.
And
it's a 5/7 as well, so it's pretty hard to get through.
Slamming of that counterspell.
Isaac, can you tell me what art that counterspell is? Can you tell me which, like, how that counterspell was released?
Oh, I know it was a promo, so it wasn't just a regular release. You can't get it in any kind of pack of Magic the Gathering.
No.
But I couldn't tell you exactly where it's from. Are you able to tell us?
I would guess that counterspell came from Josh and Pat's MTG Bazaar.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is that because you personally packed that order?
No, I'm just taking a guess.
Okay, yeah, look, that's an educated guess.
All right, so untapping with the Psychic Frog and the Tamiyo again, taking some damage from the Scythe Cat cub because it's not blocking, and it's very easy for the Psychic Frog to get flying. So kind of makes sense there, but maybe you want to force the cards out of Steven's hand, but I don't think you can afford to be honest, because the Tamiyo is just going to gain so much value otherwise.
Now, if there was a fetch land from Torin to go with this current board state, then that would put an additional counter on the Scythe Cat cub, and then it would double the number of plus on counters on the Scythe Cat cub. But with no land from Torin, that means that Scythe Cat cub, little bubby cub, little 3/3.
Yes, this Psychic Frog connecting, and Steven's drawn a Preordain, which means he can cast that and use it to flip his Tamiyo for 1 mana instead of 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Drown in the Lock, Thought Scour, Dragon's Rage Channeler, and Unlicensed Hearse in Steven's hand. So what are you wanting to interact with here on this point?
One of the things I really like about this hand is that if there is some kind of miracle thing like another Fanatic, then you can actually Thought Scour your opponent. So target your opponent to put 2 more cards in the graveyard so that my Drown in the Lock can actually counter some more things.
Yep.
Which is a cool little interaction there.
It's also really cool against Worldly Tutors. They put a Metamorphosis Fanatic on top, and then you Thought Scour them and put it in the bin.
Oh yeah, Vampire Tutor as well.
So, Steven casting a Preordain, putting 2 lands to the bottom and drawing an Urza's Bauble. So, he's going to cast the Dragon's Rage Channeler here, and probably cast the Bauble to start fueling this DRC and getting it a bit further up. Of course, the Deathrite is going to be able to activate now, but one thing Steven can do is exile the cards at instant speed from his graveyard, shutting off what is not a mana ability from the Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, because it's a target ability.
It is one of the few ways of producing mana that is not a mana ability a lot of the time. So Urza's Bauble can see one of these 3 cards and sees an Overlord of the Hauntwoods.
Overlord of the Hauntwoods. And that's the kind of card, right? It's going to cost black and 1 to actually cast, but...
No, it's the green one. 2 and a green.
2 and a green. Okay. Green, 1. That's the green Overlord. So that's a 5-drop, and there's only 4 cards in the graveyard, so Drown in the Lock doesn't counter it, but it does, with that Thought Scour, it would be able to. Only problem is only 2 lands available.
Yeah, and there's a really awkward Deathrite battle that goes on here because the Deathrite can't respond. Like, Deathrite can respond to Deathrite in order to take out the mana source.
Yeah.
So realistically, Steven only has access to 2 mana here.
Unless Torin was to tap the Deathrite first somehow. So it's a bit of a, like, whoever taps last is the one that gets the mana.
Yeah, a bit of a game of chicken here. Another cool thing about the Overlord of the Hauntwoods is resolving is it's going to put a land into play for this Scythecat Cub, and Torin goes to exile the land, and Steven exiles it right back to get the mana advantage.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. But then we might see go into combat?
No, we're still in main phase, and we've swap cycled and lightning bolted the Scythecat Cub with red.
Yep.
It's getting to surveil one as well.
So wow, what a series of interactions here. But importantly, that puts another 2 cards in the graveyard, turning on that counterspell in the hand.
So I think I spy an Endurance in Torin's hand.
Ooh. So tell us about how that Endurance might be able to interact with that Drown in the Lock.
So if a Drown in the Lock gets cast, you can always Endurance your own graveyard back into the library. So unless what the Drown in the Lock is targeting has a CMC of 0 or less, it's not going to do anything. Unless you can find another window, like with this Thought Scour, to put cards back into the graveyard. Yeah. Another fun thing about Endurance is it's really good against Dragon's Rage Channeler.
That's a good point. It gets to block it both as a 3/3 and be able to shuffle the graveyard in to turn it into a 1/1.
Oh, Endurance is a 3/4.
3/4, yes,
so
3/4.
It eats the Dragon's Rage Channeler for breakfast and gets rid of the Delirium that's shutting down any future ones.
So, Drown in the Lock counters a spell with converter mana cost equal to or less than the number of cards in that player's graveyard.
Also destroys creatures.
Also destroys creatures, yep. And this is why we're talking about that interaction with Endurance. Torin deciding, you know what? I'm not gonna go for this Overlord play. Instead, I'm actually just gonna keep this hard cast open Endurance.
So Steven end of turn sacking one of the clues there. Torin not firing off the Endurance. I think he's in a spot where he has to try and get value out of it, which is going to be very hard with Steven's hand.
Yep.
So Steven drawing a Ragavan and a land to add to his others. Considering what he's going to do and what to play around. Looks like he's going to dash a Ragavan here.
Yep. So what I'm really looking forward here to is from Torin's side, we're going to see this hard cast Endurance, and Torin's hoping that that gets countered, and so that way the shields are down in order to resolve something really incredible in order to get himself back into the game.
Yeah. So Drown in the Lock going onto the Endurance.
All right, step
going
1.
For the aggressive play and getting in for 6 points of damage.
Yep. So we see a Surveil from that Dragon's Rage Channeler. But the shields are down. Only 1 treasure token, plus the Deathrite Shaman, but there's a Deathrite Shaman on the other side.
So the shields aren't fully down because Steven has the ability to play a land for turn, is going to get a treasure token off the Ragavan, and can use the Tamiyo to buy back the counterspell.
Ooh. Now that would be a pretty powerful play and would certainly shut down the possibilities. Not completely all of them, but would shut down a lot of the available options to Torin to top deck something.
Oh, he's hit a Thoughtseize. That's so good here because the Deathrite is going to be able to exile the fetch land that Steven has in his hand if he puts it into his graveyard, and Thoughtseize one of the threats out.
Wow.
And still be able to leave open counter magic if he so desires. And because Torin's Deathrite is tapped, he can't even stop the Tamiyo buying back the counterspell if he chooses.
Okay, so we see that crack of the fetch land. And with the Deathrite Shaman on Torin's side being tapped, that gives Steven the ability to use his Deathrite Shaman, as you said. And we get to do all the things.
All the things. So he has sacked a Marsh Flats here, meaning he's going to have to find this Underground Sea. I imagine he'd really like to fund a Volcanic Island just for a second red source, but because he's had to commit mana into dashing this Ragavan, and he's going to have to continue doing that every turn if he wants to continue that way, really.
Yep, that's going to go back to hand at end of turn as well.
It's always fun having your own spells played against you, especially when your opponent already has those spells in their deck. 2 Thoughtseizers.
So, really important sequence of plays here. So making sure not to make any errors when things are really close here. We see that Thoughtseize and an Emperor of Bones to go along with that Overlord of the Hauntwoods, the green Overlord.
So Steven here has a Daze.
Ooh.
So taking the bone man.
Like Stephen has a daze. He has the ability to tick down and get the counter spell back. He also has a kitchen sink, I believe.
He does have a kitchen sink.
Yeah.
So he is buying back the counter spell, and he's considering.
I tell you what, I absolutely love this play by Stephen.
Okay.
He's saying, I am going to work out everything that's going on, work out the best options. I'm going to maybe keep a Ragavan in play for a little bit longer than it should, maybe.
Yep. And
but that's all right. We'll get some judges on that one, although I don't think it's going to be too necessary.
yeah. So the Misty Rainforest being sacked by Torin here, and that is going to, in a way, give Torin access to two mana, because the Deathrite Shaman is going to be able to exile the land from the graveyard and also have the land from the fetch land. So unless that kind of shuts off the days here, but he still does have access to the counterspell, and Torin is effectively maybe drawn a blank and is going to have to rely on the top. So what do you think here about this situation?
I think that there is one out for Torin here, one major out.
What is that out?
That out is that this Ragavan has previously been a missed trigger twice before in this tournament, and this is a third missed trigger, and that warning is going to turn into a game loss.
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, look, sometimes there's only one out, and it's kind of like not in the field of magic.
And unfortunately, Torin has already lost the out of his teammates winning him through this match.
Yep. So we're down to this. We're down to the one outer. So this is why you always hold on hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
You never know when your opponent might misclick.
Yep. I could misclick, could say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, or miss the wrong trigger in this case. So
yep.
We'll get the judges involved, and we'll work out exactly what's going to happen, and then we're going to see the resolution of the rest of this game, which I think is somewhat predicted, but there's still this one. It's still no about it. Like, what is going to happen here? What are we going to do?
So, what other things could Torin potentially draw? What possible things, like, he's got some high value cards because it is a Jund deck, and Jund deck is full of good cards, like Pyrogoyev, Metamorphosis Fanatic has got Overlord of the Balemark's a really good grindy card, but he's so far behind on board for a lot of these things.
Yeah, I think we basically kind of need like a Damnation, something that actually sweeps everything here, which is going to be hard to do considering I don't believe we have a Damnation anywhere here.
So, Stephen picking up the Surveil land to Daze, and Deathrite Shaman paying for it. I think this was just to pick up the land, to be honest, and put more cards in the bin, and to tap the Deathrite.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, so I've tapped all of your things. I'm going to get to do a bit of a...
some surveilling.
Surveilling from the Deathrite Shaman. And I get to tap down your blocker, and I get to sacrifice that treasure.
Sacrifice the treasure.
And then untap. And we don't know the life totals here, but we do know that there's 4 minutes left on the clock, and there's been a lot of damage going back and forth.
Yeah, the Psychic Frog's connected a few times. There's a DRC that's connected. There's a Ragavan that's connected. And there's a bunch of fetch lands that have been in play, and some shock lands. So I can't imagine Torin's got too healthy a life total to work with here.
And we got that Ragavan coming out as a dash. So much damage potential available here.
I think Stephen's counting up if he's got lethal, because he can also sack the clue to draw a card, and if he's got enough damage that he can throw into that Psychic Frog.
So we see discarding two cards, and we see the handshake, and there it is.
Lethal.
Wow.
And Team Bus Stop takes it.
What an exciting last couple of turns there. Despite us kind of seeing the writing on the wall, that Ragavan situation, that potential out, pretty interesting there for us as the viewers going,
oh, maybe.
Oh, maybe. There's actually a potential interaction here.
I don't know about you, Isaac, but I'm always one for spicy stories like that.
Oh, it's a bit of spicy story. Yeah, a little bit of nail biter coming into the end of the round is always something that's cool to see, especially when we're doing coverage.
Oh, absolutely. And I've heard so many cool stories this weekend of ridiculous things happening.
Yeah, there's been some pretty ridiculous stuff that I've been incredibly grateful to see on camera and have that coverage to look back over, not just today live, but also in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be good to go back and watch this, and I think that we're going to look back on this event quite fondly, to be honest. It's been a really fun time so far.
Yeah, and it's been excellent to commentate with you, Dylan, so thank you very much for being here as my coverage partner.
You too, Isaac. It's been great.
And we will see you shortly. We're going to finish up this round. And then there's, how many more rounds? One more round?
We've got one more round of Swiss, followed by a top 4 cut, because in team tournaments, when you have a top 4 cut, you have an extra round of Swiss.
Yeah. So Swiss +1, cut to top 4, and then we're going to be seeing you all later on coverage. I'm not sure if it's going to be us or someone else, but either way, have a good time. Thanks very much for us. This is MTG Bazaar coverage at Mana Clash 2025, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.